The story begins when Shino, the school's ice queen, suddenly confesses her love to Suda, our average, self-proclaimed loser of a protagonist, leaving him completely stunned. Suda can't understand why someone as popular and beautiful as Shino would even look his way, but before he can process anything, an identical copy of Shino appears. Then, in perfect unison, both of them confess their love to him, and as Suda struggles to make sense of the situation, another one shows up, making it two more girls identical to the main Shino. Noticing his confusion, the main Shino explains that on her way to school, she fell into a hole, and while waiting for someone to rescue her, she began reflecting on her feelings for Suda. Afraid she might not survive, she made a desperate promise to confess her love to him if she made it out alive. The moment she made that vow, she suddenly multiplied, and with the help of her double, she managed to escape the hole. After finishing the story, Shino asks Suda if he will be her boyfriend, but Suda wonders which Shino he is supposed to date. Just then, another copy of Shino appears and, in unison, they declare that he has to date all of them, leaving Suda completely speechless. As they press him for an answer, Suda remains silent, unable to make sense of such a bizarre situation. The three Shino copies urge him to decide, and one even resorts to moral blackmail, claiming his hesitation comes from the fact that their oranges are disappointingly small. Noticing that each girl has a different personality, Suda refuses to believe they are the same person. One of them quickly explains that they were all born from the main Shino's feelings. Basically, the first one was born from her courage, the second from embarrassment, and the third from her lust. The girls then assure Suda that they are all the same as Shino, so he can date them without feeling like a two-timing scumbag. Still, Suda feels uneasy accepting such an absurd offer, and his honesty touches the main Shino, who suggests they stay friends until the situation is resolved. Suda readily agrees, but the double, born from Shino's courage, refuses to settle for scraps, and lustful Shino supports her, pointing out that her existence proves the main Shino is aiming for some late-night edition with Suda. Shino, utterly embarrassed by this, quickly pinches her mouth tightly to shut her up. Meanwhile, Suda is lost in thought, realizing that his perfect heroine is just a normal human, and so he apologizes for treating her feelings lightly. He then asks Shino to be his girlfriend, leaving all four of them flustered and excited, while lustful Shino swoons over Suda, loudly listing all the questionable things she plans to do to him. Though embarrassed, the main Shino neither denies nor refutes her, and she accepts Suda's proposal, leaving him completely stunned. The next day, a sleep-deprived Suda keeps pondering over his updated relationship status, while his friends Ozeki and Nakamura argue pointlessly around him. For the rest of the day, the poor loser watches from a corner as Shino excels at everything, wondering how he managed to snag such an amazing girl. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted when a basketball nearly sends him to join his ancestors. Moments later, he wakes up in the school clinic with Shino sitting beside him, worried. Suda reassures her that he's fine and only passed out from lack of sleep after her confession the previous day. He then asks about her doppelgangers, and Shino explains that they vanished overnight after hanging out with her. Suda is relieved, hoping their appearance was a one-time event, while Shino is happy to enjoy a normal one-on-one relationship with him. After a brief silence, Shino suddenly grabs Suda's hands and leans in gently, making a bold move on his innocence. Suda's spirit flees, only returning when Shino swipes her thumb across his lips, and in his panic, he falls off the bed. Just as he is trying to catch his breath, Shino's courage and lust appear, while her embarrassed version sleeps soundly in the next bed. Lustful Shino explains that they always appear to watch over her love life whenever she feels shame, desire, or determination. Once that is settled, Shino resumes her advance on Suda, completely ignoring the presence of her doubles. Though taken aback, Suda doesn't resist and simply closes his eyes, bracing for the worst, but to his surprise, Shino just takes a photo, saying she wants to use it as her phone's lock screen. Suda looks almost disappointed, while lustful Shino praises Shino for planning ahead for lonely nights, earning herself an immediate scolding. Next, Suda and Shino are seen talking outside, having a rather questionable conversation while the alters cheer them on. Shino explains that her alters now appear at random, especially when she feels down. Moments later, they all ask Shino for lunch, but she reveals she didn't bring any because she had cooked at home, but it wasn't fit for consumption. Since she's skipping lunch herself, she advises them to do the same, but Suda offers to share his 5 loaves and 2 fish with everyone. However, the girls refuse, leading to a heated argument, until Suda intervenes and asks whether the 3 alters have personal names. Shino tells him that she usually refers to her alters by their attitudes or uses other ways to recognize them. Suda finds all the names she comes up with ridiculous, so he suggests naming Courage Yuki, Lust Shiki, and Embarrassment Hami. The girls happily accept the names and immediately start arguing over which is the cutest. While they bicker, Shino asks Suda to give her a name, but tells her to cherish the one her parents gave her. Shino is mesmerized when he casually calls her by her first name and leans in closer, asking him to say it again. The alters soon notice and start hounding Suda to say their names as well. Later at the cafeteria, Ozeki is stunned when Shiki invites her to sit together for lunch, and she agrees, thinking it's Shino. Afterward, she wonders why Shino is suddenly being friendly, and soon, she sees her walking by with Suda, so she greets them, puzzled about when they became friends. When Ozeki asks why Shino isn't in the cafeteria, Shino replies that she never eats there, leaving Ozeki confused. After the strange encounter with Ozeki, Suda guesses she must have run into one of the other alters. Shino concludes it must be Shiki, since Yuki is out job hunting and Hami is a self-proclaimed shut-in who spends all day gaming. Suda worries that Shino's bizarre multiplying antics could get her locked in a secret lab, inevitably ruining his love life and leaving him an eternal virgin. Shino, however, isn't too concerned, but to be safe, she suggests revisiting the scene of the initial split to find a way to restore things to normal. Moments later, she heads into the forest with Suda in search of the hole, but when they arrive, it has somehow multiplied into several holes. Suda is rattled, while Shino remains expressionless, planning to check each one. Before Suda can stop her, she jumps into the first hole, leaving him in shock. Once inside, Shino reassures him that she's fine and searches for clues but finds nothing, so she then throws him a rope, and he anchors it for her to climb out. However, after an anxious wait, Shino doesn't appear, sending Suda into a panic. He frantically calls out for her, only for a mini version of Shino to emerge from the hole, leaving him both confused and speechless. Before Suda can wrap his head around the bizarre situation, the main Shino also climbs out of the hole, making them realize she has multiplied into a younger version of herself. The young Shino, with her babbling speech, tries to convince them to treat her as an adult. Moments later, Yuki and Shiki also arrive at the scene, and Shino explains how the young version of her came about. After summing up the whole story, Shiki concludes that Suda and Shino are basically parents. Though Suda protests the idea, Shino seems to welcome it by asking the girl to call her mama, but she simply calls Shino a Dumbo. A few minutes later, Yuki arrives and immediately hugs young Shino, asking if they can keep her as a pet, which further infuriates the girl. She tells them to treat her as an adult, but the moment Shino offers her candy, her immaturity immediately explodes. The girls then urge Suda to name the young Shino, and he decides to name her Tomoko. Suddenly, they hear a rustling nearby and turn around to see Ozeki staring at them in shock. Suda is stunned and wonders how to explain the multiple Shinos while Ozeki rubs her eyes, convinced she must be dreaming. Shino and Suda quickly brainstorm solutions, and after deliberating, Shino comes up with a flimsy excuse, which Ozeki immediately shoots down. However, instead of pressing for answers, she simply informs them that she wouldn't ask since it is hard to explain. She then reassures Suda that he can depend on her since they are childhood friends. However, the revelation that Suda is actually close to Ozeki unsettles Shino and her doubles, but Ozeki quickly assures them there's nothing special between her and Suda. To mark their territory, Tomoko bluntly declares that Suda is her lover, and, horrified by this unexpected claim, Ozeki immediately opts out of her friendship subscription with Suda. Moments later, they explain everything properly to Ozeki, but she finds it unbelievable and even finds it more absurd that Shino is in love with Suda. She scolds Suda for not consulting her before dating, and Suda reminds her that she is not his big sister. After getting that out of the way, Ozeki then asks Shino how her parents are handling the whole situation, but Shino tells her that she hasn't discussed it with them. Shino explains that they sneak around when her mother is not at home and take turns eating at breakfast and dinner while they use her meager allowance for lunch. Hearing this, Suda feels bad for being a loser boyfriend as he finally realizes that the girls barely get to eat anything. With Tomoko in the picture, Suda believes that things might get trickier, so he suggests they involve Shino's parents, but she refuses, believing they can get by with the money from Yuki's part-time job. However, Suda insists, and Ozeki backs him up, pointing out that with limited nourishment, their orange farms might enter their flop era. Armed with this important information, the girls immediately agree to get Shino's parents involved, and seeing Ozeki's industrial-grade cushions is what seals the deal for them. Shino wants to talk to her parents alone, but Suda, in an attempt to be a model boyfriend, offers to do it with her. Shino is moved to hear this and concludes that he must be trying to seek permission from her parents to marry her. Ozeki quietly listens to their discussion about marriage, and when she is fed up, she sarcastically suggests they get engaged immediately since they have reached the stage of visiting the parents. She then expresses her satisfaction with Shino, whom she once thought was cold and aloof, and advises Suda to hold onto her tightly. After speaking her mind, Ozeki decides to befriend the girls and even accepts them as Suda's girlfriends. To celebrate the start of their friendship, she offers to treat them to a meal, making the girls treat her like their savior. On their way back, she reconnects with Shiki, reminding her about their cafeteria encounter. Shiki quickly explains that she ate a high-calorie dish in the cafeteria to build up her strength to enjoy Suda's sausages as the main dish. This explanation pleases Ozeki so much, and the two girls immediately bond over being fellow apex predators, leaving Suda feeling uncomfortable. After treating the girls to a mountain of food, Suda asks Shino how she plans to manage dinner, and she reminds him that Hami is still holed up gaming, so she'll take their place. Ozeki suddenly interrupts, trembling at the thought of the outrageous bill, and Suda offers to split it with her. Afterward, they head to Shino's house, where her mother, Miyuki, welcomes them warmly without the slightest surprise at the sight of the doppelgangers. She explains that she noticed them sneaking around the house, but chose not to say anything, knowing Shino wasn't ready to tell her yet. Realizing she already knows, Suda and Ozeki feel a wave of relief. Meanwhile, Shiki and Yuki immediately make themselves at home because, as part of Shino, they already know the house like the back of their hands. Just then, Shino walks in carrying a cat she calls Suda number 2, and since Suda is apparently number 1, Miyuki starts referring to him that way instead of using his name. Before long, they all settle down, and Shino tells her mother about the personality split, bluntly asking if they can stay. Without asking a single question, Miyuki agrees, leaving everyone stunned by her nonchalant attitude. Suda finds this mind-blowing and questions her about it, but she simply explains that for generations, strange phenomena always occurred to the women in their family when they hit puberty. Ozeki and Suda try to learn more, but Miyuki brushes them off by asking Suda if he is dating Ozeki or Shino. Suda hurriedly clarifies the whole thing while Ozeki can clearly see that Miyuki is trying to dodge their questions. Miyuki then asks Suda to take care of her daughters, leaving him so embarrassed that he wishes to briefly retire to the ground. With everything else settled, the alters decide to take turns attending school, but Miyuki refuses, declaring that the girls will be enrolled in school. Later, Hami throws a tantrum when she hears the news about enrolling in school because all she wants to do is play games. To convince her, Shino reminds her that she gets to see Suda in school every day, but Hami explains that she is too embarrassed to face him. Shino tries to encourage her by explaining how she was able to muster up the courage to confess her feelings to Suda and even befriend Ozeki. Pumped up with her personal TED Talk, Shino believes she might soon become the next Kevin Hart of Japan if things keep progressing this way. A few days later, Suda is anxious as he waits for Shino and her alters to make their debut in school. During their last meeting, Miyuki suggested introducing them as quadruplets without including Tomoko, since she is only in grade school. Ozeki also suggested cooking up more backstories for their sudden appearance, but every idea suggested by Miyuki was trash, convincing Suda that she might have a few nuts loose. First, she suggests that Shiki's backstory should be that she was studying abroad, while Yuki was a warrior in a parallel universe, and Hami was a home security guard. Suda trashed all the ideas and suggested something like living with relatives or being hospitalized for a long time, which Miyuki immediately settled for. However, Ozeki and Suda still felt like they needed to buff it up with more details to make their story believable, but Miyuki and her bunch of dumb daughters had already settled for the half-baked solution. After the meeting, she had insisted that Suda and Ozeki stay for dinner, but they turned her down. Back in the present, Suda is still worrying about the vague backstory when Nakamura's arrival snaps him back to reality. Nakamura tries to find out why Suda is deep in thought, but Ozeki soon arrives and treats him like trash, which hurts his fragile ego. She then whispers to Suda, asking about his plans for Shino and her double's arrival, but Suda informs her that he has nothing planned. Hoping to be included in their conversation, Nakamura informs them that 3 pretty girls will be joining their class, but Ozeki and Suda's empty expression leaves him disappointed. Moments later, Shino arrives, and their silent, lovey-dovey exchange makes Ozeki uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Nakamura watches the 3 of them cluelessly, and when he is fed up, he urgently asks Ozeki for an explanation, but she simply tells him to back off. Just then, their homeroom teacher steps into the classroom, and Suda and Ozeki wait anxiously as he prepares to call in the new girls. Yuki and Shiki soon enter the classroom, while it takes a little more convincing from the teacher to get Hami to stop hiding behind the door. The classroom instantly erupts in surprised chatter as soon as they see the girls, and the teacher introduces them as Shino's sisters. He explains that they have different reasons for enrolling late, but urges the class not to question the girls about their reasons. Reflecting on what Miyuki told him, the teacher suddenly starts crying profusely, saying that the girls have been through a lot of hardships. Suda is stunned by the whole drama, making him wonder what kind of excuse Miyuki cooked up to shake the teacher to this extent. After the introductions, Shino throws a victory sign to Suda, seeing as their plan was successful. As soon as class dismisses, a crowd surrounds Shino and the girls, treating them like exotic zoo animals. While Shiki and Yuki bask in the attention, Hami grows overwhelmed, struggling to keep it together as Suda and Ozeki watch anxiously from a distance. Meanwhile, Nakamura, like a loser dork, loudly asks the girls if they have boyfriends, making the whole class cringe. Even though they attack him, Nakamura does not budge, convinced that he is speaking for other boys in the class. However, even the boys deny him right away, so he turns to Suda, who instantly renounces any involvement with the demented cuckoo. Suddenly, some girls ask the same question, but everyone treats it as a way to deepen friendship, leaving Nakamura devastated. However, before anyone can press further for answers, Shiki smoothly changes the subject, impressing Suda. Ozeki then tells Suda to prepare for annihilation if anyone ever uncovers that the quads only have eyes for him. Later during gym period, Yuki draws attention by being extremely fast, and Shiki excels during cooking class. Shino, on the other hand, seems to be struggling with her loser boyfriend, and even Hami, who has social anxiety, somehow manages to glow in her element while teaching others how to game. Suda and Ozeki are relieved that the girls are fitting in perfectly, except for Shino, who they notice is sulking. She complains that the girls are using her skills to gain all the attention while she is tossed to the corner like old cargo. But instead of consoling her, Ozeki slyly shifts Shino's attention by teasing Suda. After school, Shino invites Suda to walk home together, but Hami overhears it and loudly expresses her intention to join them. Her outburst instantly draws the attention of everyone in the classroom, and to make matters worse, Shiki and Yuki also join in, complaining that it is unfair to allow only Shino to enjoy all the privileges. Seeing the class curious about the whole situation, Shiki indirectly hints that they all like Suda, leaving everyone stunned. They immediately demand an explanation from Suda, and Shino makes the situation worse by publicly declaring her love for him. The moment the words leave her mouth, Suda becomes public enemy number 1, and Ozeki quickly begins preparing his memorial. Next, Suda returns to class bruised and battered after facing a firing squad over his involvement with Shino and the girls. Ozeki and the others are furious and ready to confront the boys, but Suda assures them they didn't actually hurt him. Apparently, they had dragged him to a deserted spot, with class president Muraki, whose name everyone always seems to get wrong, acting as their self-appointed spokesperson. The boys practically flatlined when Suda revealed he was dating Shino, and when Muraki heard that Shino had made the first move, his glasses shattered in shock, leaving Suda wondering if he'd somehow become a side character in a manga. Muraki trembled as he grilled Suda about his relationship with the other girls, and Suda quietly considered how best to respond. However, his silence convinced them that the other girls must truly have feelings for him, leaving the boys bleeding from all 7 orifices. Meanwhile, Suda felt inferior to some of the more promising losers in his class, making him question what Shino could possibly see in a flop like him. Muraki, refusing to accept the outcome of the interrogation, forced Suda to swear he wasn't dating the other 3 girls. That reluctant confession gave the boys a glimmer of false hope, and almost instantly, as if switching vendors, their attention shifted from Shino to the other girls. Suda, disgusted by their fickleness, scolded the boys for treating the girls like objects and immediately apologized. After recounting his ordeal to Shino and the girls, they all praised him for standing up for them in their absence. Ozeki then asks how he got the bruises, and Suda explains that Nakamura had arrived late and, in a misguided attempt to play hero, stormed in like Quicksilver, only to shove Suda down the stairs like trash. As soon as he finishes the story, the culprit, Nakamura, enters the room to apologize to Suda, only to be met with stern glares and a well-deserved whacking from the girls. During the weekend, Suda goes to a restaurant with Nakamura, who offers to treat him to a meal as an apology for pushing him down the stairs. Nakamura then asks why he is not on a date with Shino, but Suda, flustered, replies that it is too early for them to take that step. Nakamura is disappointed to hear this and roasts Suda for being a slowpoke. He explains that Shino is definitely waiting for him to make the first move, and then decides to be Suda's love guru. However, Before he can show off his skills, Shino calls Suda, and after the call, Suda informs Nakamura that Shino just asked him out on a date. This information instantly shatters Nakamura's plans of playing the perfect love guru side character. Attempting to redeem his tiny ego, he immediately offers to serve as Suda's stylist for the date, but Suda instantly rejects the idea because Nakamura is a walking fashion disaster. Shortly after their meal, Nakamura asks Suda about his true feelings for Shino, believing he isn't the type to casually date a girl just because she is a goddess who confessed first. To respond to his question, Suda recounts that he first encountered Shino near the school restroom a few days into the start of school. Back then, he was struck by her beauty but concluded that she was not his cup of tea due to his own lowly status. On his way out, however, he overheard her arguing with her mother on the phone, which caught him off guard. He turned back and met her gaze, but she stared at him coldly, making him wish he could exit his own body. After a tense staring contest, she practically fled from him as if he carried the plague, leaving him utterly defeated. What moved Suda most was that a girl as astounding as Shino could openly defy her mother like any mere mortal. From that day, he began paying closer attention to her and gradually realized that, beneath her perfect facade, she was just a clumsy, ordinary mortal, though certainly not a loser like him. After shattering Nakamura's illusions of the school's perfect ice queen, Suda admits that Shino had been on his mind ever since. Just as he is about to confess that he truly loves her, a rustling sound interrupts him, and he turns around to find Shino and Ozeki spying on them. Surprised, Suda asks Shino why she's hiding there, but instead of answering normally, she suddenly pretends to be a dumb cat. Just a few moments earlier, Shino had gone over to Ozeki's house to discuss the next steps for a relationship with Suda. Ozeki was disappointed when she learned that they hadn't even held hands after almost a month of dating. Shino explains that she fears any physical contact with Suda, as she might lose control and jump at him in the process. Unable to understand Shino's cryptic words, Ozeki firmly suggests she go on a date with Suda and make sure to clear the holding hands hurdle. Despite spelling it out, Shino still asks how she is supposed to initiate the date, making Ozeki question if they have even been on one. Shino confidently informs her that they ate at a roadside stall after school, but Ozeki tells her that it can't be considered an actual date. Fed up with their slow-burning relationship, Ozeki orders her to call Suda immediately and ask him on a date, but Shino realizes she doesn't even have his number, almost driving Ozeki insane. She immediately snatches the phone and calls Suda, declaring that she is planning a date for him and Shino's scheduled for the next day. She refuses to give Suda a chance to ask questions and hands the phone to Shino, who immediately expresses her desire to go on a date with him. Suda, who is at the restaurant with Nakamura and already planning how to ask her out, eagerly agrees, and they set a meeting point. After the call, Shino thanks Ozeki for playing matchmaker, and the two decide to work on a game plan to help Shino get through her date smoothly. After searching the internet, Ozeki picked a restaurant, and they decided to inspect it, but on their way, they saw Suda and Nakamura. Ozeki was the one who wanted to hide, and Shino complied even though she couldn't understand why. It was during this time that Nakamura first discovered them, and Suda also turned around, catching them red-handed. After being discovered, she pretended to be a cat, but to their shock, the person acting like a dumb cat was actually Yuki, and just then, Shino also appeared out of nowhere. The following day, Suda heads to the meeting spot, and his anxiety shoots up when he sees Shino. Mustering every bit of courage in him, he approaches her and, without a word, extends his hands to her. Shino immediately takes his hand, and they quietly head out while Ozeki, dressed as a little cat lady, lurks in the shadows with a reluctant Nakamura, monitoring their progress. It is revealed that Shiki is also with them, and Ozeki asks how she feels about the date. Shiki reassures her that she is all love and light and only came to make sure Shino was doing fine. Ozeki asks if she loves Suda, and Shiki admits she does, but adds that the love she feels was simply inherited from Shino. Being the queen of deflecting, Shiki immediately switches the subject to her usual notorious flirty jokes, after which she suggests they hang out. However, they completely forget to include Nakamura in the plan, crushing him, and his fragile ego finally shatters when Shiki casually mentions that she can't date him, even though he's a nice guy. Later, Nakamura suggests inviting the other girls to join them, but Shiki immediately rejects the idea. She explains that, to prevent them from interrupting Shino's date, she had tied and locked them in the closet. Ozeki proposes going back to free them, but Shiki assures them that Miyuki and Tomoko will handle it. However, after a bit of persuasion, Shiki agrees and even commends Ozeki for being so kind. Nakamura tries to fish for a compliment, but she brushes him off, saying she only knows him as Suda's friend. Moments later, they arrive at Shino's home only to find Suda and Shino in the living room. Ozeki instantly erupts, demanding to know why the date had ended, but Shino simply says she wanted to try having the date in her room, leaving Ozeki completely defeated after all her wasted efforts. Then Suda calmly asks Ozeki how she knew they held hands, making her realize that she had spilled the beans during her earlier outburst. Afterwards, Suda and his friends head out, but even though it didn't feel like a date, Shino still tells Suda that she enjoyed their time together. She then promises to move on to second base on their next date, leaving Suda flustered. While Suda fades into the background like a side character, Shino and Ozeki discuss his wall-slamming future as if he doesn't exist. She tells him not to worry about doing all the work, promising to also practice being on the receiving end of a wall slam. Everyone seems to be following the conversation, except for Yuki and Hami, who are as clueless as bats. Ozeki suggests a hug or kiss, while Shiki, the Queen of Tramps, chimes in, suggesting a bedroom edition of World Wrestling Entertainment, but her idea is even too much for someone like Ozeki. As the conversation switches to strictly parental guidance mode, Yuki and Hami turn red due to severe embarrassment. Moments later, everyone remembers that Suda exists when Shiki asks for his opinion, but he is unable to contribute to the conversation. Refusing to let him breathe, she questions him again on his opinion regarding having seismic activity with Shino. The question temporarily sends Suda's spirit out of his body, while Shino, Hami, and Yuki wish they could retire underground. After regaining his composure, Suda calmly responds, saying he plans to wait till he is legally responsible to have play dates without parental supervision. Despite his expert answer, Shiki refuses to back down and urges him to go enjoy himself, declaring that she will take full responsibility. However, Suda rejects her idea while Hami and Yuki back him up. Shiki explains that her lustful person might vanish if they decide to put off the inevitable for a few more years. Seeing everyone suddenly acting like a dumb prude annoys Shiki, so she decides to expose Yuki and Hami's secret desire to devour Suda whole. They both crumble to the ground, embarrassed, wondering how Shiki knew about it, so she reminds them that they are all the same person. Having won the debate, she turns to face Suda, telling him to make a bold move when he is ready, since all versions of Shino are on the same page. Though flustered by Shiki's lack of shame, Suda agrees after a brief moment of babbling. After leaving Shino's house, Nakamura finally comes to terms with the fact that Suda is dating Shino. He tells Ozeki that he's relieved that someone finally saw Suda's worth out of his pile of rubbish. Ozeki is momentarily moved seeing Nakamura acting like a human being for once, but just when he thinks she might be starting to see his worth, Ozeki slams her hand into his face to shut his garbage trap up. They soon start to bicker as usual until Suda intervenes. Meanwhile, Hami and Yuki gather to settle the score with Shiki for locking them in the closet. Shiki calmly explains that she did it to keep them from interrupting Shino's date. The two of them are, however, upset that she didn't trust them, insisting they would have quietly cheered from the sidelines. Shiki argues that they would have been discovered anyway, and Suda, being the good guy he is, would have turned the romantic outing into a group activity. Yuki and Hami instantly shrink, realizing she's absolutely right, but still unwilling to take responsibility, they decide to merge back into Shino to see how the date went. But when Yuki presses the plushy merge button, nothing happens, and after several frantic attempts, she realizes that she can't return at all. As the dreadful possibility of never being part of Shino sinks in, Yuki begins to panic, leaving Shino confused. Hami tries to explain the situation properly, but Shino is too dense to understand it, forcing Hami and Shiki to resort to some disturbing analogies to get the point across. They eventually calm Yuki down, only for her anxiety to spike again when she realizes that Hami and Shiki aren't experiencing the same problem. With no better option, Shino decides to consult her mother, while Yuki quietly heads to bed. Moments later, they consult Miyuki, but she is equally clueless, and instead of offering any comfort, she settles for making curry. Shino is concerned about her mother's detached attitude, but Miyuki simply orders her to call Yuki down for dinner. Elsewhere, Ozeki and Nakamura interrogate Suda about the details of his first date with Shino. Nakamura, in particular, seems far more interested in whether Suda received any kind of premium audience appreciation package. Instead of indulging them, however, Suda deflects with a question of his own, asking why they think Shino chose to date him in the first place. His question only convinces Ozeki and Nakamura that their friend is definitely a narcissist, but Suda hurriedly tries to convince them otherwise. He then recounts that he asked Shino where she wanted to go after leaving the station holding hands. He had suggested a couple of dating spots, but was only met with silence. Noticing how pale she looked, he asked if something was wrong, and Shino admitted that holding his hand made her extremely nervous, but when Suda tried to let go to ease her discomfort, she refused. Suda confesses to his friends that her reaction unsettled and made him feel like a fraud, as if Shino might be mistaken about who he really is. After listening to his pathetic rambling, Ozeki explains that most love-struck girls tend to treat the object of their affection like a huge deal. Though Suda feels relieved that this is apparently normal behavior on the Japanese manga planet, he still can't understand why Shino chose him in the first place. Before he can press further for answers, Shino suddenly calls, informing him that Yuki is missing. After calling Suda, Shino and her family split into two groups to search for Yuki. Miyuki pairs up with Tomoko, while Shino teams up with the others. Tomoko is stunned to see Miyuki practically enjoying the situation instead of panicking like a normal mother. Miyuki cheerfully explains that she's excited because this is the first time Shino has ever asked for her help. With an abnormal enthusiasm, she sets off, already planning how to give Yuki a very serious lecture once they find her. Elsewhere, Suda searches for Yuki, and after wandering aimlessly for a while, he suddenly realizes where she might have gone. Moments later, he arrives at the very spot where he had picked Shino up for their date earlier, and finds Yuki sitting there alone. He rushes over, and Yuki is surprised to learn that everyone is out looking for her. She apologizes to him and explains that she was too upset to eat dinner and couldn't bear the embarrassment of facing the others, so she slipped out to buy something on her own. She adds that after leaving home, she grew curious and absent-mindedly wandered to the very place where Shino had met Suda earlier for their date. Suda is simply relieved to have found her, and the two immediately begin heading back. On the way, he brings up what he heard about her inability to merge with Shino and asks whether she feels anything unusual that might be causing it. Yuki admits that something has been weighing on her, and she fears that if she can't return, she won't be able to share Shino's feelings anymore and will just remain an ordinary girl, cut off from the original. Suda gently reassures her that even if she can't reconnect, she can still exist as her own person. He confesses that he never truly saw Shino and her multiples as a single entity and has always treated each of them as individuals. Though grateful for his words, Yuki points out that if she can never merge with Shino again, then Suda would officially become a true two-timing scumbag. Suda tries to defend himself, but Yuki only enjoys teasing him for a moment before her expression suddenly turns serious. Just as she is about to say something important, Shino arrives and cuts the moment short. Without a word, she tells Yuki to come home and thanks Suda for helping search, but before he can respond, she bids him farewell and leaves, leaving Suda wondering what Yuki was about to confess. Shortly after, Ozeki and Nakamura catch up to Suda, and he informs them that Yuki has been found. Then, out of nowhere, Nakamura asks which of the three girls is actually Yuki. Realizing that the idiot has been sprinting around all this time without even knowing who he was looking for, Ozeki whacks him hard on the head. Back home, Tomoko acts like the actual adult and questions Yuki about her disappearance, making her apologize for pulling a Houdini on them. Miyuki tries to chime in, but Tomoko blatantly shuts her down, disrespectfully referring to her by her first name. After accepting Yuki's apology on everyone's behalf, Tomoko orders Miyuki to serve Yuki dinner, and she happily complies as if taking instructions from her senior. Tomoko then dishes out several commands and orders Miyuki to also serve her food, leaving the other wondering if their mother is a weak wuss. She then tells Yuki not to worry about merging with Shino, explaining that she'll be able to return soon. The girls ask how she knows, but she simply tells them that it is simply a woman's intuition. Moments later, Miyuki serves the food, and Tomoko sternly reminds her that she is supposed to scold Yuki. However, the only thing Miyuki can come up with after thinking about how to respond is to pathetically say one measly word. That night, while soaking in the tub, Yuki continues to fret over her problem until Tomoko suddenly pops out from under the water, surprising her. Like an immature lad, she teases Yuki with her new toy gun, and soon they both run out of breath. While catching their breath, Tomoko reveals that she has figured out why Yuki can't return. This is because, apparently, their existence is meant to support Shino and Suda's relationship, but earlier, Yuki had failed to fulfill her role as Shino's courage. Tomoko explains that Yuki hadn't given Shino the encouragement she needed before the date, and if she had done so, Shino wouldn't have been so nervous around Suda, which might have produced a different outcome. Yuki's inability to return, Tomoko explains, is a kind of penalty for failing her duty as Shino's courage. Her assessment makes sense, and Yuki finally understands why she had been feeling anxious the entire day. With such a restriction in place, she feels that Suda's advice to be an individual is simply impossible. Yuki then asks Tomoko what kind of penalty she would face, since there aren't many situations in Shino's life where an immature version of herself would be needed. That question, however, infuriates Tomoko so much that she loses her footing in the tub in a fit of rage. Later that night, Shino offers Yuki her bed to cheer her up, and while the two are playfully teasing each other, Yuki suddenly vanishes. The next day, Yuki is over the moon that a restriction has been lifted, and without hesitation, she eagerly encourages Shino to go pick up Suda from his house. After picking him up, Suda later expresses his surprise at suddenly seeing them in his house that morning. He tells Shino that he was actually happy to see her at the start of his day. Yuki is proud of her decision to play the catalyst, and Shino thanks her for the good work. Shiki then suggests doing something more mature next time to give her the opportunity to shine in her element. While they are chatting happily, a snubby young dude named Kuda suddenly picks on Hami, and he is followed closely behind by his friend, Fumika. Hami introduces Kuda and Fumika as grade schoolers who also happen to be her gamer friends. Fumika then blurts out that Hami told them Suda is her boyfriend, and he is supposedly madly in love with her. Suda is stunned, while Hami turns bright red, desperately trying to explain that she was only trying to prove she isn't a loser. Shiki and the others seize the opportunity to tease her mercilessly, leaving Hami even more horrified at being caught in such an awkward situation. After clearing up the awkward moment, Kuda quickly drags Hami away to continue their gaming. Before leaving, he shoots Suda a murderous glare, which Suda actually notices, but Shino insists the boy is just staring because Suda is such a catch. Suda smirks and reminds her that she is the only princess who treats a frog like a prince. After school the following day, Shino invites Suda to walk home with her, but on their way out, they notice Hami deep in thought. While heading home, Hami informs them that Kuda is moving away, but he asked her to do something disturbing. She explains that after he told them about it, Kuda suddenly revealed that he wants to confess to his crush before moving away. Everyone asked if he liked Fumika, but he bluntly rejected her, making Hami convinced that he must like her. However, Kuda cruelly informed her that he wasn't into mature flavors, leaving Hami's heart bruised. Hami shockingly reveals that the girl Kuda has a crush on is actually Shino, leaving everyone confused. To make sure Suda doesn't overthink things, Shino immediately reassures him that she will always be his woman. However, Suda is unfazed and refuses to take a petty grade schooler seriously. Meanwhile, Hami can't understand why she is a vintage edition while the original, Shino, is not. Elsewhere, Fumika asks Kuda if he really plans to confess his feelings to Shino. Kuda bluntly says yes, explaining that he doesn't want to live with regrets once he moves away. Hearing something that cringy from someone still wet behind the ears like her nearly makes Fumika gag. Kuda, however, is more concerned about Suda's true identity, and he refuses to accept it when Fumika suggests that Suda might actually be Shino's boyfriend. In his eyes, Suda is just a basic loser who doesn't deserve a girl like Shino. Meanwhile, Suda returns home to see a letter of challenge from Kuda, and he immediately calls Hami to ask for her opinion, but her brain short-circuits, making her unable to come up with any response. Shino then snatches the phone from Hami and clearly tells Suda that she is in love with him, permitting him to handle the challenge however he sees fit. Suda agrees to take care of it and thanks Shino for giving him clarity. After the call, Shino asks Hami for details about the challenge, but Hami quickly deflects and changes the subject by commending her for giving Suda such good advice. Shino explains that she did it because Shiki told her to be blunt in order to further progress things between her and Suda. The following day, Suda meets up for the challenge, and Kuda commends him for not being a chicken. He then questions Suda about his relationship with Shino, and Suda bluntly replies that she is his girlfriend. Kuda is infuriated to hear this while Fumika chuckles happily at the revelation, earning her a scolding from Kuda. He then states that he will never tolerate his crush dating a loser and declares that he will be testing Suda to determine if he truly deserves Shino. Kuda declares that he must break up with Shino if he loses, but Suda refuses, explaining that the challenge has no benefit for him. Fumika also backs him up, but earns a stern warning from Kuda to back off. Seeing the immature dude is relentless, Suda accepts the challenge and even offers to set up a meeting for him with Shino if he wins. He further promises to accept the outcome if Shino dumps him after Kuda's confession. After laying down the rules, Fumika suddenly chimes in, asking what they will give her if she wins, leaving both Suda and Kuda confused. Moments later, they arrive at an abandoned tunnel, where Kuda explains that the challenge is a test of endurance. Each of them will enter a separate tunnel, and whoever can remain inside the darkness the longest wins. He then adds that he's relieved they didn't choose a video game competition, since he would have definitely lost. The realization that he may have just missed the perfect chance to completely crush Suda hits Kuda hard. Still, he quickly hides his regret, insisting he avoided a gaming challenge on purpose because it wouldn't have been fair to Suda. Meanwhile, Fumika tries to participate in the challenge, but they refuse to let her, and so she decides to be the judge. After roasting Kuda, she asks Suda if he would like anything else. Suda sensibly suggests setting a time limit so they don't end up staying until nightfall, especially since it wouldn't be safe for Fumika to be out too late. Though Fumika praises the idea, Kuda believes there shouldn't be any time limit in a fight between men. To convince him, Suda offers to let him win if they eventually exit the tunnel at the same time, and Kuda agrees. After laying out all the rules, Fumika heads into the tunnel to wait for them at the end. Moments later, Kuda and Suda also head into the eerie tunnel to wait according to the time limit. At first, Kuda is creeped out by the darkness, but after a while inside, he gets accustomed to it. While waiting, he reflects on the first time he fell in love with Shino. One day, while playing games, Shino suddenly recognized Suda as Hami's friend and approached him, asking him to be tolerant of her. Even though he knows that this whole challenge is stupid, Suda is still determined to see it through to the end. His timer soon goes off, and he heads out of the tunnel where Suda, Shino, and Fumika are waiting for him. Kuda is infuriated when he sees that they got Shino involved in his cringy challenge. Suda explains that he called her to set the meeting as promised since he lost the challenge. It is only then that dumb Kuda realizes Suda never treated him as an opponent in the first place, but Fumika had already figured it out earlier. Afterwards, Shino asks why Kuda wants to see her, and after a few incoherent babblings, he chickens out. However, after confirming that Suda doesn't mind him confessing to Shino, Kuda immediately confesses his love to her and asks her to date him. As soon as the words leave his mouth, Kuda forgets that oxygen is not optional. A few eternities later, Shino suddenly rejects him in the most immature way possible and clings to Suda, declaring her love for him. Kuda is completely crushed and tries to convince her that Suda is a loser, but this instantly infuriates Shino, and she warns him never to speak ill of her precious Suda. This final dagger practically stabs at his heart, but he accepts his pathetic fate and quietly heads home alone like a sore loser. However, after he leaves, Shino and Fumika celebrate his departure. It is immediately revealed that the person who turned Kuda down is just Hami pretending to be Shino, and the whole thing was part of their collective plan. Suda worries that they might have damaged Kuda, but Fumika assures him that he will soon come to his senses when he realizes her worth instead of chasing manga tails. She then explains her plan to break him and then save him, convincing Suda that women are truly terrifying. Meanwhile, Hami's embarrassment finally hits as she recalls all the cringy things she had to say to make Kuda give up. Seeing that the act was hard for her, Suda wonders why she didn't just call the real Shino instead. Hami explains that she was just looking out for him because it might be weird for Suda to watch someone else confessing to his girlfriend. Suda is moved that she was actually thinking of him and gently pats her head like a cat. However, this action further leaves her flustered, and she suddenly blurts out that she doesn't deserve such nice words. Hami is soon overwhelmed and collapses on the ground like a happy, overfed dog, and Suda even has to carry her home on his back. A few days after the challenge, Suda learns from Hami that Fumika and Kuda are now dating each other. She explains that they even kissed when Fumika went to see him off on the day of his move. Hami is disappointed that boys are so fickle, while Suda can't believe that a grade schooler has made more progress in a few short days than his entire life combined. Reflecting on his pathetic life, Suda finally understands that he actually lost to a cringy lad like Kuda. Worried that his lack of courage might be holding Shino back, Suda asks Hami for her opinion. Unfortunately, the mere mention of a kiss short-circuits her brain, rendering her incapable of offering any advice. Fortunately, Shiki swoops, the self-proclaimed tramp queen swoops in and tries to practice with Suda, but he refuses. He plans to gauge Shino's feelings before making any moves, but Shiki tells him that all their feelings are similar. Seeing that he remains doubtful, Shiki vows to use any means necessary to convince him that Shino wants to lock lips so badly. Meanwhile, inside the classroom, Ozeki, Shino, and Yuki overhear everything Suda is discussing with Shiki and Hami. Ozeki bluntly asks Shino whether she wants to kiss Suda, and Shino quietly replies that she doesn't know. However, the flustered expression across her face instantly betrays her true feelings. That night, Suda is unable to sleep as a barrage of thoughts about the topic keeps him awake. Apart from being comfortable holding hands with her, Suda fears that his indecision might be tormenting Shino. Frustrated by his spiraling thoughts, Suda screams his lungs out, attracting his big brother's attention. Unable to stop his racing thoughts, Suda heads out for a quick stroll, but the major thing that haunts him is the vow Shiki made earlier. Just as he is beginning to feel uneasy about it, someone knocks him out, and before passing out, Suda recognizes it as Shiki's voice. A few moments later, Suda awakens in Shino's room, only to find her sleeping peacefully beside him. Before he can even process the situation, Shiki's voice suddenly blares from a speaker, making him realize she has even installed a camera to monitor them. Shiki cheerfully informs him that he cannot leave the room unless he locks lips with Shino. Reflecting on this situation, Suda wonders what he did to deserve being trapped in a low-budget spin-off of Squid Game. However, in the middle of their exchange, Shino awakens and notices Suda sitting there, but she gently tells him that she loves him and then drifts back to sleep, convinced she must be dreaming. The moment she dozes off again, Shiki resumes explaining the rules of the game, leaving Suda completely frustrated. Thanks for watching till the end, and make sure to comment multiply the chaos to know what happens in part 2.